They said it right there in the living room, the one I helped pay for. The walls were a color called grayish, a word that felt as empty and hollow as the room itself. There was no warmth, no history, just clean lines and furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. My son, Michael, and his wife, Sarah, were showing me a photo album. Not a real one, with plastic sleeves and thick cardboard pages. It was on a tablet, a sleek, cold piece of glass. They swiped through pictures of their trip to Italy, the Colosseum, canals in Venice, a plate of pasta that looked too perfect to be real. In them, Michael, Sarah, and my grandson Ben, all smiles, all bright, store-bought happiness. I kept waiting to see myself. They had insisted I come. "We want to share it with you, Dad," Michael had said on the phone. His voice had that strained patience it always did when he talked to me, like he was explaining something to a child or a slow-witted dog. I had driven 2 hours through traffic that made the bones in my back ache for this. To sit on a couch that felt like a rock and look at pictures on a screen. We reached the end of the slideshow. Ben was standing with his arms around both his parents, a mountain range behind them. A perfect family portrait. "That's a nice one," I said. My voice sounded rough in the quiet room, like an old engine trying to turn over. Sarah smiled. It was a thin, polished thing. "We're getting it framed for the hallway." "A big 1 inch," I nodded. I waited. I looked from the screen to her face, then to Michael's. He was looking at his phone, already somewhere else. "I guess my camera skills aren't what they used to be," I said, trying for a little joke. "Don't see any of the shots I took. It was a lie." They hadn't let me touch the camera. They brought their own complex digital thing and a tripod. Everything was planned, timed, professional. Sarah's smile tightened. She exchanged a look with Michael, who finally glanced up. It was the kind of look I'd seen 1,000 times. The kind that said, "You handle this." "Well, Dad," she began, her tone sweet and condescending. "We talked about it, and we decided to go for a more modern vibe this year." I just looked at her. "You're not in the family vacation photos this year, Dad," she said, as if she were delivering a weather report. "It's a modern vibe. Just us. The core unit, the core unit." The words hung in the air. They didn't land like a punch. They landed like a feather, so light I almost didn't feel it. But the feather was poisoned. I looked at Michael, my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, who I held on my shoulders so he could see the parade. The one whose college tuition I paid for with 20 years of overtime at the plant, my hands stained with grease and metal dust. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was studying a speck of dust on the hardwood floor. He gave a little shrug, a gesture of helplessness that was really one of agreement. I felt something inside me go still. It wasn't anger. I had felt anger before, when the foreman called me boy, when the bank denied my first loan, when I buried my wife, Eleanor, far too young. Anger was a hot, roaring fire. This was different. This was cold. It was the quiet click of a lock falling into place. A door closing, not with a slam, but with a soft, final seal. I smiled. It must have been a strange smile, because Sarah's own smile faltered. She looked confused. She had expected me to be hurt, to argue, to be the sad old man they could pat on the shoulder and feel good about. But I wasn't sad. I was free. "All right," I said, my voice steady now. I pushed myself up from the hard couch. My knees complained, but I ignored them. "I understand." Michael finally looked at me, a flicker of something, relief, guilt, in his eyes. "Dad, it's not personal. It's just aesthetics. I nodded again, as if he'd said something profound. "Well, I'd better get on the road." "Beat the traffic. You just got here," Sarah said, the performance of concern kicking in. "Stay for dinner." We were going to order sushi. I used to love sushi. But the thought of it now, of sitting at their sterile table making small talk, felt impossible, like trying to breathe underwater. "No, thank you," I said. I walked toward the door. I didn't look at the walls, or the framed art, or the hallway where my picture would never hang. I just looked at the doorknob. It was brushed nickel, cold to the touch. "Dad, wait," Michael said, following me. "Don't be like this, be like what?" I wanted to ask. Quiet? Invisible? The way you've wanted me to be for years. I didn't say any of that. I just turned the knob. Drive safe, son, I said. And then I was outside in the cool evening air, and I pulled the door closed behind me. I didn't hear the lock click. They probably didn't lock their doors. They lived in a gated community, safe from everything but themselves. The drive home was different. I didn't notice the traffic. I didn't feel the ache in my back. I drove my old Buick, the one Michael was always trying to get me to sell. He said it was a gas guzzler, an antique. He didn't understand that the worn leather of the driver's seat was molded to the shape of my body, that I knew every groan and sigh of the engine like it was my own breathing. When I got home, the house was dark. It smelled of old books, lemon polish, and the faint, lingering scent of my wife's rosewater perfume that never quite left her side of the closet. It smelled like a life. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't pour myself a drink. I walked into my study, the small room off the living room that was all mine. My sanctuary. My father's old desk stood against the far wall. It was solid oak, heavy and dark. I ran my hand over the surface. It was smooth from decades of use. My father's hands. My hands. I sat in the leather chair, the one with the crack in the left armrest. I didn't turn on the lamp. I just sat there in the dark, the street lights outside casting long shadows on the floor. The core unit. Aesthetics. The words came back to me, but they had lost their power. They were just noise now, the buzzing of a fly against a window pane. I thought about my granddaughter, Maya, Michael's daughter from his first marriage. They didn't talk about her much. She was too much like her mother, they said. Too loud, too opinionated, too real. She was at Spelman College down in Atlanta. Smart as a whip. She called me every Sunday, without fail. Not out of duty, but because she wanted to. We'd talk about her classes, about the books she was reading, about the state of the world. She never asked me for anything. She just listened. She was the one who saw me. I remembered her last visit. She had sat on the floor, looking through my old record collection. "Grandpa, you have Etta James? And Sam Cooke? This is the real stuff." We spent the afternoon listening to music. She told me about her dream of studying abroad, of seeing the world not as a tourist, but as a student, of learning a new language, a new way of being. "It's expensive, though," she'd said with a sigh. "Mom helps where she can, but, I knew." I sat at my desk for a long time. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, another thing Michael wanted me to get rid of. "It's so old-fashioned, Dad." "Yes," I thought. "It is. It measures time. Real time. Not the frantic, empty rush of their lives." After a while, I stood up and turned on the small green banker's lamp on the desk. The sudden pool of light felt warm, focused. I pulled out a piece of paper. Not just any paper. The heavy, cream-colored stationery I saved for important letters. I took out my fountain pen, the one Eleanor gave me for our 25th anniversary. I unscrewed the cap and felt the satisfying weight of it in my hand. I didn't write a letter to Michael. I didn't write a bitter screed about family and neglect. I started making a list. The first item on the list was a name. Mr. Peterson, a lawyer my friend from the barber shop, Earl, had recommended years ago. "He's a good man," Earl had said. "He understands our business." The second item was bank. The third was, the fourth was Spelman College study abroad program. I wrote the words slowly, carefully. The ink was dark and permanent on the page. Each letter was a small act of construction. I wasn't tearing something down. I was building something new. For the first time in a long, long time, my hands were not trembling. They were steady. I finished the list and set the pen down. I looked at what I had written. It wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a blueprint for a life. My life. I folded the paper once and slid it into the top drawer of the desk. Then I went into the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee. Strong and black, the way I like it. The rich, bitter smell filled the quiet house. It was a good smell. The smell of a man who was finally, truly awake. The next morning, I woke before the sun. This was not unusual. My body was still tuned to the rhythms of a factory whistle, of a life lived by the clock. But this morning felt different. The air in my bedroom felt lighter. I did not linger in bed. I got up, showered, and dressed. Not in the comfortable old sweaters and worn trousers I usually wore. I put on a pair of gray flannel slacks, a crisp white shirt, and the navy blue blazer I saved for church and funerals. I polished my best leather shoes until I could see my own face in them, a ritual my father had taught me. A man is judged by his shoes and his word, Arthur. Keep them both clean. While the coffee brewed, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the list I had made. The ink was dry. The words were solid, unchangeable. First, Mr. Peterson. I found a card on my old roll-top desk, tucked into a dusty address book. The card was simple, elegant. Charles Peterson, Esquire. Estates and probates, I called the number. A polite, efficient voice answered on the second ring. I'd like to make an appointment with Mr. Peterson, I said. My voice was firm. Of course, sir. Is it regarding an existing matter? No, I said. It's a new one. She found a spot for me at 10 o'clock. Will you be needing to make any changes to a power of attorney? She asked, a standard question. The question hit me with the force of a physical blow. Power of attorney. I had signed that document 5 years ago after a small health scare. Michael had insisted. It's just to make things easier, Dad. So I can handle your bills if you can't. I had signed it without a second thought. An act of trust. An act of love. Now, the phrase tasted like ash in my mouth. Yes, I said, my voice colder than I intended. Yes, I will. I hung up the phone and drank my coffee, standing by the window that looked out over my backyard. The roses Eleanor had planted were still blooming, even this late in the season. Stubborn and beautiful. At 9:30, I left the house. I drove the Buick downtown. The lawyer's office was in one of the older, more distinguished buildings, the kind with marble floors and brass elevators. It smelled of old paper and quiet money. Mr. Peterson was a man about my age. Tall, thin, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was black like me. His suit was impeccably tailored. He stood up when I entered his office and shook my hand. His grip was firm. Mr. Franklin, he said, a pleasure. Please, have a seat. His office was lined with books. Not for decoration. They were worn, tabbed, used. On his desk was a single-frame photo of a woman and 2 grown children. A family. What can I do for you today? He asked, getting straight to the point. I didn't ramble. I didn't tell him the story of the photo album or the modern vibe. He wasn't my priest or my therapist. He was my lawyer. He needed facts, not feelings. I need to revoke a durable power of attorney, I said. It lists my son, Michael Franklin. Mr. Peterson simply nodded, his face impassive. He made a note on a yellow legal pad. Understood. We can prepare that document today. Good, I said. Next, I want to discuss my will. He leaned forward slightly. Is your current will on file with us? No. It was drafted years ago. My wife and we did it together. Everything was to go to each other, and then to our son. I paused. My wife, Eleanor, passed 10 years ago. My condolences, he said, and it sounded genuine. The current will leaves everything to my son. The house, my savings, my pension benefits, everything. And you wish to make changes? I wish to make a new one, I said. From scratch for the first time, Mr. Peterson's professional mask slipped just a little. A flicker of curiosity crossed his face. But he simply said, very well. Let's discuss your wishes. This was the part one had rehearsed in my mind during the long, quiet hours of the night. The house, I began. I intend to sell it. This seemed to surprise him. The family home? It's too big for one man, I said simply. Too many ghosts. It was a half-truth. The ghosts were my friends. It was the expectations of the living that had become the burden. I want the proceeds from the sale, along with my savings and investments, to be placed into a trust, he repeated, writing quickly. And the beneficiary? Here it was, the heart of the matter. I have a granddaughter, I said, Maya Franklin. She is a student at Spelman College in Atlanta. I gave him her full name and date of birth. I want the trust to provide for her education. Completely. Tuition, books, living expenses. whatever she needs. And I want a portion of it to fund a new program at the college. I slid the cream-colored paper across the desk. He picked it up. A study abroad scholarship, he read aloud, his eyebrows raising slightly. For students in the humanities. In the name of Eleanor Franklin, he looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw not just a lawyer, but a man who understood. He saw the shape of the story without me having to tell it. He understood legacy. He understood the power of a name. That's a beautiful tribute, Mr. Franklin, he said quietly. My wife loved books, I said. She always wanted to see the world. We never got the chance. We spent the next hour working through the details. The structure of the trust. The executor of the new will. I named Mr. Peterson as the executor. I didn't want any family involved. Not anymore. What about your son? He asked gently as we were finishing up. Will he be receiving anything? I thought for a moment. I thought about the boy with the scraped knee. I thought about the young man, proud in his graduation gown. And I thought about the man who looked at the floor while his wife erased me from our family's history. Vengeance felt cheap. Pettiness was their currency, not mine. My father's tools, I said. He was a carpenter. They're in my workshop. They were his, then they were mine. I'd always intended for them to be Michael's. I paused. And my record collection. He can have that too. Mr. Peterson wrote it down. The tools and the record collection. Anything else? $1, I said, so that the will cannot be contested on the grounds of accidental omission. He nodded, his face unreadable. Understood. He had the revocation of power of attorney typed up while I waited. A young paralegal brought it in. It was a single page, full of dense legal language. But 2 words stood out. Hereby revokes. I signed it with the same fountain pen I had used the night before. My signature was clear and strong, not the shaky scrawl of an old man. The signature of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. We'll have this delivered by courier to your son's office this afternoon, Mr. Peterson said. And we'll file it with all your financial institutions. Thank you, I said, standing up. I felt taller than I had in years. My next stop was the bank. It was the same branch I had been using for 40 years. I knew the manager, a woman named Mrs. Gable, by her first name. I didn't need an appointment. I walked in, and the teller waved me over to her desk. Arthur, she said, smiling. Good to see you. Just cashing your pension check. Something a bit different today, Brenda, I said. I explained what I needed. To close my joint savings account with my son and open a new one in my name only. To remove him as a signatory on my checking account. Her smile faded. She looked concerned. Is everything all right, Arthur? She was a good woman. She'd sent a casserole over when Eleanor died. Everything is fine, Brenda, I said. I'm just simplifying things. It was the word Sarah and Michael were so fond of. They were always trying to simplify my life. Give me a phone with bigger buttons, a medical alert necklace, a subscription meal service. They thought simplifying meant removing choices. I was learning it meant something else entirely. It meant removing obstacles. The paperwork took 20 minutes. With a few keystrokes and another signature, 40 years of shared financial history were severed. A new bank book was printed, with only one name on it, Arthur Franklin. Holding it felt like holding a key. I walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon sun. The world looked sharper, the colors more vivid. I knew the courier would be arriving at Michael's downtown office soon. The phone calls would start. The texts. The storm was coming. But I was not afraid. I was the quiet eye of my own hurricane. I went home, put on a Sam Cooke record, and went into my workshop. It was time to get to work. The workshop was my favorite place in the world. It smelled of sawdust and machine oil and the sharp, clean scent of turpentine. It was a place of order, a place where things could be measured, cut, and joined. A place where things made sense. Against the back wall was the tool chest. It wasn't one of those modern red metal things on wheels. It was oak, the same as my father's desk, and he had built it himself. Each drawer was lined with green felt. Each tool had its place. I opened the top drawer. Inside, nestled in the felt, were my father's hand planes. Stanley Bailey planes, from a time when tools were made to last 100 years. Their wooden handles were dark and smooth from the touch of his hands, and then mine. I had always imagined a third set of hands on them. Michael's. I remembered bringing him into the shop when he was a boy. He was about 8 years old. I tried to show him how to use a spoke of chave, how to feel the grain of the wood, how to peel off a perfect, translucent shaving. He was bored in 5 minutes. He wanted to go inside and play video games. "This is boring, Dad," he'd whine. "It's old-fashioned," there was that word again. Old-fashioned. I had closed the drawer then, disappointed but not surprised. I told myself, he's just a boy. He'll come around. He never did. He grew up to be a man who hired people to fix things, who bought new things when the old ones broke, who didn't see the value in a tool that had been passed down through generations. I took the planes out one by one. I wiped them down with an oilcloth, the familiar, meditative motion calming my thoughts. These were not just tools. They were a history, a legacy, a language, and my son didn't speak it. I had willed the tools to him. Now that felt wrong, like giving a rare book to someone who couldn't read. It wasn't a gift. It was a burden, an object they would store in their pristine garage until they could sell it for a few dollars at an estate sale. I carefully wrapped each plane in oilcloth and placed them in a separate wooden box. I did the same with the chisels, the hand saws with their intricate handles, the heavy mallets. It took me 2 hours. When I was done, the main tool chest felt lighter, emptier. The phone started ringing around 3 o'clock. The caller ID showed Michael's office number. I let it ring. It rang 10 times, then stopped. A minute later, my cell phone buzzed on the workbench. A text message. I picked it up. "Dad, a courier just dropped off a legal document." "What is this?" "Call me." I looked at the message. I saw the confusion, the indignation. There was no concern, just annoyance. I had disrupted his day. I deleted the message. I did not reply. My silence was a new tool, one I was just learning how to use. It was sharper than any chisel. The phone buzzed again. A new text. "I'm trying to check your bank account online, and it's not working. Did you change the password?" I deleted that one, too. Then came the voicemails. The first one was from Michael. His voice was tight, controlled fury. "Dad, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not funny. You revoke my power of attorney? After all I do for you? Call me back." Now all he did for me. The phrase was so absurd, I almost laughed. What did he do? He called once a week, a rushed, 5-minute conversation on his commute home. He sent a generic fruit basket for my birthday. He invited me over for holidays, where I sat on the edge of their perfect life like a ghost at a banquet. What he did was manage my decline, patiently, efficiently, waiting for me to become the burden he already believed me to be. I deleted the voicemail before he was finished speaking. The next call was from Sarah. Her voice was a syrupy performance of worry. "Arthur, it's Sarah. Michael is very upset. We're worried about you. Are you okay? Have you taken your medication? Please call us back. We're just concerned. They were concerned that their access had been cut off. Concerned that the asset they were managing had suddenly developed a mind of its own. I deleted her voicemail. I turned back to my work. I had an old rocking chair that had been Eleanor's favorite. One of the runners had a crack in it. I had been meaning to fix it for months, but I never seemed to have the time. Or maybe I just didn't have a heart. Now I did. I put on my work apron. I selected a piece of maple from the woodpile. I began to measure, to saw, to shape. The work was slow and precise. It required all my attention. It filled the space that the phone calls were trying to invade. The scent of freshly cut maple filled the air, clean and sweet. The scrape of the plane, the rasp of the saw, the tap of the mallet. These are the only sounds I wanted to hear. I worked until the sun went down. My back ached and my hands were stiff, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that comes from creating something, not from enduring something. That evening, I did not go into the living room. I stayed in the kitchen. I made myself a simple dinner, an omelet and a piece of toast. I ate at the small kitchen table, the one Eleanor and I had shared for 50 years. On the wall opposite the table was a collection of framed photographs, family pictures, They were old, faded. Michael is a baby. His first day of school. Our trip to the Grand Canyon, the one where I carried him on my shoulders because his little legs were tired. And in the center, a large photo from our wedding. Eleanor was so beautiful. Her smile so bright it could have lit up the whole church. I was thin as a rail in my rented tuxedo, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world. I looked at that young man, and I felt a pang of kinship. He had a whole life ahead of him. He didn't know the joys that were coming. He didn't know the sorrows, either. But he knew one thing. He knew who he was, and he knew what mattered. Somehow, over the years, I had forgotten. I had let myself be defined by my role. Husband, father, worker, widower, retiree, and finally burden. Now, I was just Arthur. I finished my dinner and washed the dishes. As I was drying my hands, I glanced at the largest family portrait on the wall. It was from about 15 years ago. A professional shot taken in a park. Me, Eleanor, Michael, his first wife, and a little girl with bright, curious eyes, Maya. Everyone was smiling for the camera, except Maya. She was looking at me, a small, secret smile on her face, as if we shared a private joke. I took the picture down from the wall. I wiped the dust from the glass. I carried it into my study and set it on the corner of my desk, right next to the green lamp. The other family photos, the ones in the hallway that documented Michael's life, his achievements, his second family, I walked past them without a glance. They were just paper and glass. They had nothing to do with me anymore. Before I went to bed, I checked my phone. 14 missed calls. 22 text messages. I turned the phone off. Completely off. The screen went black. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. The next few days passed in a state of quiet industry. I finished repairing Eleanor's rocking chair. I sanded it down to the bare wood and gave it a fresh coat of varnish. It looked almost new, but better because it held its history within it. Mr. Peterson called to inform me he had found a realtor, a sensible woman who specialized in older homes. She was coming by next week. I spent my time sorting through 50 years of accumulated life. It was not a sad task. I expected it to be, but it wasn't. Each object was a memory, and I found I could hold the memory without needing to hold the object. I packed boxes for Goodwill. I made a pile of things for a junk hauler, and I set aside a small collection of treasures. Eleanor's books, my father's desk, my record player, and the vinyl collection. I hadn't decided what to do about that yet. The will said it was for Michael, but the thought of my John Coltrane and B. King albums sitting in his cold, silent house felt wrong. The calls and texts for Michael and Sarah had slowed, then stopped. I knew this was not a surrender. It was a regrouping. They were planning their next move. I imagined them in their grayish living room, talking in hushed, angry tones. What's wrong with him? Is he senile? Who is putting these ideas in his head? They could not conceive that the ideas were my own. On Sunday morning, my landline rang. I had left it on just in case. It was my one concession to the outside world. I answered. Hello. Grandpa. The voice was clear and bright. Maya. Hey, sweetheart, I said, a real smile spreading across my face. It felt strange, like an unused muscle. I've been calling your cell, she said. It keeps going straight to voicemail. I was getting worried. Her worry felt different from Sarah's. It was not an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. I turned it off for a few days, I said. Needed some quiet. There was a pause on the line. Is everything okay? She asked. You sound different. Everything is fine, Maya. Better than fine. Okay, she said slowly. She didn't push. She didn't demand an explanation. She trusted me. Well, I just called to check in. I have a paper on Zora Neale Hurston due next week. It's kicking my butt. We talked for half an hour. We talked about her paper, about her roommate, about the terrible food in the dining hall. She told me about a boy in her political science class who was smart but argued too much. I told her about the rocking chair I had fixed. We didn't talk about Michael or Sarah. We didn't talk about photos or aesthetics or core units. We just talked. It was easy. It was normal. As we were about to hang up, she hesitated. "Grandpa, Dad called me yesterday." I gripped the receiver a little tighter. "Oh, yeah. He was acting weird. He asked if I had been talking to you, if you had said anything strange. He said you were acting erratically erratic." That was the word they had settled on. The first step toward painting me as incompetent. Unsound of mind. "What did you tell him?" I asked, my voice even. "I told him we talk every Sunday like always, and that you sound like you always do." "Like my grandpa," she paused. "Then I told him to maybe think about why you might be upset with him." He didn't like that. He hung up. A surge of pride and love for this young woman washed over me. She had defended me. She had stood up to him. "Thank you, Maya," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I love you, Grandpa," she said softly. "Whatever is going on, I'm on your team." When I hung up the phone, I had to sit down. My team. I hadn't had a team in a long time. The conversation solidified my resolve. The trust, the scholarship, it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do. My legacy wouldn't be a house full of furniture. It would be this bright, fierce young woman, walking through the streets of Paris or sitting in a library in Ghana, her mind on fire with new ideas. It would be other young women like her, given a chance they might not have had otherwise. All in Eleanor's name. That afternoon, I made a decision about the records. I packed them carefully into sturdy cardboard boxes. Each one, the jazz, the blues, the soul, the gospel, the soundtrack of my life. I wrote a note and tucked it into the box with the Etta James album. Then I called my friend Earl from the barbershop. He had a son who was a musician, a young man who played the saxophone and had a deep respect for the old masters. "Earl," I said, "I've got something for your boy." The next day, Earl's son, Marcus, came by. He was a quiet, respectful young man with long, clever fingers. He looked at the boxes of records with wide, reverent eyes. "Mr. Franklin, are you sure?" he asked. This is a treasure. A treasure is no good buried in a box, son," I said. "Music is meant to be played." "You'll play it?" "Yes, sir," he said, his voice full of awe. "I will." He started to lift a box. Then he noticed the note. He pulled it out and read it. "To Marcus, your father tells me you understand this music. That means you'll understand it's a living thing. Don't just preserve it. Use it. Argue with it. Build on it. And when you're an old man, find a young person who understands and pass it on. That's the only rule. Arthur Franklin." He looked up from a note, his eyes shining. "Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I won't let you down." Watching him carry my records out to his car felt good. It felt right. I was not losing them. I was setting them free. The realtor, Mrs. Davis, arrived on Tuesday. She was a no-nonsense woman with a warm smile and a clipboard. She walked through the house, making notes. "Good bones," she said, knocking on a wall in the living room. "Plaster, not drywall. They don't build them like this anymore." She saw the value. She didn't talk about modern vibes or open-concept living. She talked about the hardwood floors, the quality of the light, the mature garden. "You've taken good care of this place, Mr. Franklin," she said. "My wife did." I corrected her. "I just kept it up after she was gone." We sat at the kitchen table, and she laid out her plan. The listing price she suggested was higher than I expected. A house with this much character in this neighborhood? It'll sell fast, she predicted. Probably to a young family looking for something with a soul. Something with a soul. I like that. I signed a contract. We were putting the house on the market at the end of the week. That night, I started looking for an apartment. I didn't want another house. I wanted something small, easy, a place where I was responsible for nothing outside my own four walls. I found a listing for a senior living community, but the pictures looked sterile and sad. It reminded me of Michael and Sarah's house. Then I found it, a one-bedroom apartment in an old, converted brick building downtown. It was on the third floor with big windows overlooking a park. It was only a few blocks from the library and a short walk from Earl's barbershop. It was perfect. I called the next day and made an appointment to see it. The confrontation I had been expecting came on Thursday evening. I was in the living room, packing Eleanor's books into boxes, when I saw the headlights sweep across the window. A sleek, silver SUV. Michael's car. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't scared. I just felt a deep, weary sense of inevitability. I didn't rush to the door. I carefully placed a copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God into the box and sealed it with tape. Then I went and sat in my armchair, the one I always sat in. I waited. The doorbell rang, a sharp, impatient chime. Then, before I could even think about getting up, I heard a key in the lock. Of course, he still had a key. I had forgotten that. Another small, invisible tether. The door opened, and Michael and Sarah stood there, silhouetted against the evening light. They looked like they were storming a castle. "Dad," Michael said, his voice tight. He stepped inside, Sarah right behind him. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of righteous anger. "Michael." "Sarah," I said calmly. I didn't get up. They stopped in the middle of the living room, taking in the scene. The stacked boxes, the empty spaces on the walls. "What is all this?" Michael demanded, gesturing around the room. "What are you doing?" "I'm packing," I said simply. "Packing for what?" Sarah snapped. "A trip? Are you trying to punish us?" "Because this little stunt of yours has gone far enough." Her words, meant to wound, had no effect. It was like watching a child throw a tantrum. "I'm selling the house," I said. The words landed in the room with a thud. Both of them stared at me, their mouths slightly agape. They looked, for the first time, genuinely shocked. "You're what?" Michael stammered. "You can't. This is the family home. It's my home, Michael," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "And I've decided to sell it." "You can't do that," he repeated, his voice rising. "Everything this was supposed to be for us." For Ben, there it was. The truth, stripped bare of all pretense. It wasn't about my welfare or my happiness or the memories. It was about their inheritance, an asset they had already factored into their future. "The house is not yours to worry about," I said. Sarah stepped forward. "Your daughter-in-law, Maya, seems to think you've lost your mind," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "And frankly, Arthur, we're beginning to agree. First the bank accounts, now this. What have you done with the money?" That was a mistake. Mentioning Maya and implying I was a thief. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her. I saw a woman consumed by appearances, by what she thought she was owed. I felt nothing for her. Not hatred, not even dislike, just a profound and empty pity. "The money, as you call it, is my own," I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady register. "And what I do with it is my business. Not yours. It is our business when you're giving it away." Michael shouted. "I spoke to Earl today. He told me you gave his son your record collection. Your father's records. Are you insane?" "Marcus will appreciate them," I said. "He will listen to them." "That's more than you would have done." Michael ran a hand through his perfect hair, his face flushed with anger. "This is about the pictures, isn't it? This is what this is all about. You're punishing us over a few stupid vacation photos." "No," I said. I stood up slowly from my chair. I was surprised to find I was still a few inches taller than him. I had felt so small around him for so long. "It's not about the pictures, Michael. It's about what they meant. It's about the fact that you stood there and said nothing. It's about the word aesthetics. It's about the phrase, the core unit. It's about 50 years of my life, my work, my love, being reduced to something that could be edited out for a modern vibe." I took a step toward them. They both instinctively took a step back. "You didn't see me, Michael. You haven't seen me in years. You see a problem to be managed, a chore to be handled, an account to be balanced. You and your wife. You looked at me, and you decided I was no longer essential to the picture. You were just honest enough to finally say it out loud." I walked past them to the front door, which they had left wide open. I took the key from the inside of the lock. It was still attached to the ridiculous, oversized keychain Sarah had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. It said, "World's Best, Dad." I held it out to Michael. "You'll be needing this back," I said. He stared at the key as if it were a snake. He didn't take it. "Get out of my house," I said. My voice was not loud. It was as quiet as the grave. Sarah scoffed. "You can't be serious." "We're not leaving until we sort this out. The sorting is done," I said. I looked at my son. "I loved you, Michael. I think a part of me always will. But the man I am now is no longer your father. He's just Arthur Franklin, and he requires you to leave his property. I stepped out onto the porch, holding the door open. The message was clear. They were the outsiders now. Michael looked from my face to the boxes, his expression a mixture of fury and utter bewilderment. He had lost control, and he didn't know how to get it back. Finally, he turned and stalked out the door, bumping my shoulder as he passed. Sarah followed, giving me a look of pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Arthur," she hissed. "No," I said, as they walked toward their car. "I don't think I will." I closed the door. This time, I turned the deadbolt. The sound of it sliding home was deeply satisfying. I went back to the living room, picked up the box I had been packing, and carried it to the stack by the door. The house was quiet again. My quiet. The move was easier than I thought it would be. Mrs. Davis was as good as her word. The house sold in 4 days to a young couple with a toddler. They loved the garden and the big kitchen. The young woman, a doctor, told me she couldn't wait to fill the bookshelves. I knew Eleanor's house was in good hands. Mr. Peterson handled the closing. The funds were transferred directly into the new trust account. The Eleanor Franklin Scholarship for Global Studies was no longer an idea on a piece of paper. It was real. I moved into my new apartment with only the things that mattered. My father's desk, my armchair, Eleanor's rocking chair, the photo of me and Eleanor on our wedding day, and the one of me and Maya, a few boxes of books, my clothes, my toolbox, the small one with the essentials for household repairs, the large chest of my father's tools I had driven to a museum of woodworking I admired. After a long conversation with the curator, a woman who handled the old tools with reverence, I had donated them. They would be preserved and displayed, their story told to people who understood their worth. My new apartment quickly began to feel like home. The big windows faced west, and every evening, the setting sun filled the small living room with golden light. I set up my armchair by the window. From there, I could see the trees in the park and the people walking their dogs. I fell into a new rhythm. I woke up when I wanted. I drank my coffee while reading the actual, physical newspaper. I took long walks. I spent afternoons at the library. I reconnected with old friends. Earl and I started a weekly dominoes game at the barber shop. I was not lonely. I had spent years feeling lonely in crowded rooms, surrounded by family. I found that I much preferred being alone, but not lonely. Maya called every Sunday as always. I told her about the scholarship. At first, she was silent. Then I heard her start to cry. "Grandpa," she whispered. I don't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "Just do great things." "That's all the thanks I need." She told me she was applying for a program in Florence. "To study art history, Grandpa." For Grandma Eleanor. I received a letter forwarded from Mr. Peterson's office. It was from Michael. His handwriting was an untidy scrawl, the penmanship of a man who did everything on a keyboard. It was a long letter, full of confusion and anger at first, then accusations, then, finally, a few clumsy sentences of what might have been an apology. He wrote that he missed the house. He wrote that Ben asked about me. He wrote that he didn't understand. "I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings," he wrote. "That was not our intention. If we hurt your feelings." The classic non-apology. It put the blame on my feelings, not on their actions. I read the letter twice. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel a rush of forgiveness either. I just felt a quiet sadness for the man he had become. A man so disconnected from his own heart that he couldn't understand the heart of another, even his own father's. I didn't throw the letter away. I folded it and placed it in the drawer of my father's desk, next to the list I had made what felt like a lifetime ago. I did not reply. The time for words had passed. If he ever truly wanted to connect with me, he would have to learn a new language. The language of action, of respect, of showing up. The door was not locked and bolted, but it was no longer wide open, waiting for him to deign to walk through it. He would have to knock, and I would decide if I wanted to answer. One afternoon, I was sitting in my armchair, watching the leaves turn to gold in the park. My phone buzzed. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture, a young woman with a radiant smile, standing in front of a magnificent cathedral. Behind her, the city of Florence glowed in the afternoon sun. Maya. Beneath the picture was a single line of text. Wish you were here, Grandpa. Thank you for everything. I looked at the picture for a long time. I saw my granddaughter happy and free. I saw my wife's dream finally realized. I saw the future. And in the reflection on the dark screen, I saw my own face. An old man in a comfortable chair, in a quiet room, with the sun on his face. I was not in the family vacation photos. I was somewhere far more important. I was in my own life, and it was a life with a very modern vibe. It was all mine. I smiled, a real smile this time, and I put my phone away. The dominoes game with Earl was starting in an hour, and I didn't want to be late. I had a life to live. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone.